Yes. Okay, we're live. I'd just like to welcome everybody, straighten myself in the screen here. Just like to welcome everybody to, this is the 4th episode of Awakened Conversations. And I have with me today Síofra O'Donovan. Síofra is a published author and writing coach for over 20 years. She has received numerous Arts Council, Louth and Wicklow Bursaries and Awards for her work, and the Dorothy and Granville Hicks Awards at Yaddo's Artist Colony in New York and the Tyrone Guthrie Centre in Ireland. She was writer in residence in Louth from 2004 to 2006. Her writing workshops are not think tanks of criticism, but crucibles of creativity. And we're going to be getting into that today because Síofra is running a creative writing course that's starting, is it next week, Síofra?
Yeah, starting next week, the Thursday, the 7th of April.
Yeah, and it's the hero's journey is kind of the theme of it. Síofra's courses are called the Heroes, as just said, and the Heroines Writing Workshops, and are unique where new writers discover their voice and practiced writers remove their blocks. And just to quote a testimonial from one of these, one of the people that have done Síofra's course before is, I found this course to be extraordinary, challenging, rewarding, inspirational. Síofra creates an atmosphere of such creativity, a safe space to write. I wrote a short story called A Dance with Time, which was long-listed for the Column Tobin short story, and that's from Zandra C., a participant in the Hero's Journey Writing Workshop. And that is the intro. So I suppose just to let everyone know, I first met Síofra at this, we had a Saoirse Creatives event down in Doolin, and Síofra was kind enough to give a presentation of her works, and it was very well received, and a broad spectrum of types of writing as well. But I suppose I was reading through your bio, Síofra, and where I'd like to start is to maybe go back to your college days in UCD, because I was in UCD for 3 weeks in 1991, and
you survived.
I just survived, got transferred west, vanished to the west after 3 weeks. So why don't we start there with your time in UCD and kind of where when or how soon you knew that you wanted to pursue a career in writing?
Yeah, well, actually, Jerry, I started in UCG. I did a year in UCG. Michael D. Higgins taught me the Constitution. How ironic!
He tried to teach me it as well. Oh, isn't that gas? How long were you in UCG for?
I was there for first arts. I completed it all. I did everything, but I thought the English department was a bit crap. So also I had a little red bike, and everybody was a little bit drunk, and I was a little bit drunk for the whole year. And it rained every day of the year. And I also wanted to do history of art, actually, as well as, like, I knew the English department in UCD was like absolutely brilliant at the time, because you had all these cool field day guys like Seamus Dean and Declan Kiberd, and Declan Kiberd's been an amazing mentor for me in my life. And Gus Martin, he wouldn't have kind of maybe to jump up and down, but some brilliant tutors and stuff. So then, I did UCD. I did my 3 years there. History of art was kind of okay, you know. But English was absolutely amazing. And like everybody else, or many people, I was like, absolutely wild in college. But I went to every single lecture and tutorial. And
you were that wild.
So I mustn't have been. But I did love everything that I studied. So, like, I guess to say, like, it was a traditional route that I kind of took. And
well, can I just hop in there just for 1 sec? Because obviously I wouldn't have been aware of the differences between the standard of, we'll say, lecture or course structure in UCG, between UCG and UCD. So obviously, even at that stage, when you're 17, 18, 19, whatever age you were in first arts, you obviously had a lot of knowledge, and you were doing a lot of, you must have been doing a lot of kind of research into this path, because
I don't really know how I knew, but I just heard. By the way, I was 16 when I went to college in Galway, 16 going on 17. I think, my mother threw me into school very early because she said I was bored. I think she was bored. And And then actually in between, I took a year out between those two things and did a transfer to UCD. So I only had to do 2 subjects my first year. And I went and I lived in Italy and wrote for a magazine in Rome and roamed around and had a brilliant time, and lived in South Spain and stuff. So I guess, yeah, I don't know how I knew about Seamus Dean. Was unbelievably extraordinary as a lecturer. I don't know how I heard about him, but I just seemed to know that UCD was the place to go for English. I have to say, absolutely hate UCD. I mean, I hate the campus, the way it's designed to stop, protests and riots and stuff like that. I was never mad about it. I didn't really have any great connections with people I studied with. I kind of thought, well, why aren't they kind of interested in what they're reading? And I was kind of bored. So I had a whole lot of friends in NCAD, used to hang out there all the time, and then used to go to gallery openings and get as much free wine as possible. It was a great time.
Yeah. It was, UCD. Yeah, it's been in the paper recently over the non-response to the, I think some professor resigned there recently over the
right.
Over they weren't able. They made some public statement about Ukraine and Russia that didn't even cause it a conflict, and it was to do, like, there's I don't know what you call them centers. The Chinese government have built one of those educational centers on the campus, but so it gives them a bit of influence as to what they say or do. But it's some professor there resigned over the kind of press release UCD sent out over it. But anyway, that's by the by.
It's a highly conservative place, really is. Very, very much so now. I mean, I've been there recently because I've been doing research for the Kevin Barry book, because there's a whole bunch of papers in the archives there that belong to my granddad, and I've been going through those, and I just thought, what a bad atmosphere. Just nothing about it enticed me to hang out there. I just wanted to get out as soon as possible.
So you've mentioned a few things there, even starting that you've gone to, like, when you say you went to Italy, was that during your college years?
Well, that was in a gap year, yeah, but I went back kind of every couple of summers after that. Lived in Rome, had done a TEFL course, had one address in Parioli, nice posh area in Rome, and knocked on the door, and I said, "Is this a school?" They said, "No, it's a travel agent. What do you want?" I said, "I want a job." They said, "Okay, we'll give you a job." They were all very nice and everything, but I mean, I was 19, I think then, maybe 18, 19, and they said, "Oh, you can have a job in writing for our magazine, our travel magazine, Globus." It was like a dream job, but I got paid about as much as I get paid, for sweeping floors. But I didn't care. It was absolutely brilliant. It was like an intern job or something. It was really cool. Lived with an old English lady around the corner on Via di Trezona near the Villa Ada, and it was sort of like felt like I was living in a book. It was cool.
And did you write outside of the magazine writing? Did you start writing your?
Oh yeah. Like during my first year in UCD, I wrote like a lot of poetry, but I didn't really show it to anybody or anything. And then when I graduated from UCD in '94, I lived in Monkstown at the time, and the sort of idea dropped into my head at the bus stop, and I ran home and wrote the first page. And that's the kind of thing I do. I get an idea and I go, whoa, I have to do this. So I wrote my first page, and it was like a book called Fenella. It was my first novel. It was never published. It was about a little girl her parents were in mental home. She went to live with her grandparents. And it's kind of actually based on the truth, because I've got a kind of funny family. And it's really like a kind of, in a way, it's a coming of age kind of novel, but she never really grows up, and it's kind of very poetic and lyrical. And I got the most beautiful rejection letter from Anthony Farrell in Lilith Press, who later became my publisher. Beautiful handwriting and beautiful reflection, and a couple of other lovely rejection letters. You'd never get those these days, but they had time in those days. So that novel, I moved to Poland in '94. I lived there. I worked in university there, and then I completed that novel by '95. And then I got huge inspiration. And again, the same thing, the idea drops out of the sky. And I see this character, Stanislav. I think you've met him in Malinsky, my novel Malinsky, which was published by Lilith Press. and Stanislav, I could literally hear his voice, and I imagined him living at the top of a tower block. And so I went back to my apartment on ulica Święty Bronisław, and I wrote the first page of that, and then later came back to Ireland and did all the research that was needed. But I also interviewed a lot of people, not kind of formally even, but I just met a lot of interesting people, and they're all interestingly from Lvov. And my first boyfriend, Romek, was half Polish, and his grandfather was from Lvov, and his great uncle was killed in the Kachin forest by Stalin. So I had some kind of definitely predestined thing to go to that part of the world. I had a green card to go to America, and all my friends went to New York, but I said, oh, feck it, I'm going to Poland, because a wonderful friend called Magdalena moved into my apartment. She was one of the early Polish people to come to Ireland a very long time ago. We just clicked straight away. We were kindred spirits, and she told me all about the music of Zbigniew Preisner. We played it, the music for Red, White and Blue, the films of Kieslowski, and I was like, I'm going there, because I'd gone on some kind of trip with the Bolton Street architecture group to Prague, and I was like, amazed, because it was like a country just out of communism, and that was
I just want to stop you. I just want to ask you a question there. So from 94, you're saying you went to Poland.
Yeah.
And was that based on your friendship with, were you friends with Magdalena at that stage?
Yes. She
right. Okay.
She said, don't forget about your green card. Write to all the universities. They give you a job. No worries. And they did give me a job.
Wow.
I was freshly graduated, and, it was just so exciting. But then I got there and I absolutely hated it. I was in Poznan in West Poland, and it was very kind of Germanic. I didn't feel comfortable there. And I lived in horrible university accommodation for the foreign staff. It was like a converted prison for women dissidents, and I had bars in the window. I had great fun in many ways, but halfway through, very naughtily, I broke my contract and ran away to Krakow, and then I worked there.
I've been in Krakow.
Yeah, wonderful place, and that became my
gorgeous
second home. Yeah.
And how did you cope with not having Polish, or did you pick it up quickly?
Well, I had a really funny experience at first, because I'd be on the bus, going out to this place called Koziegowie, which is where I had the accommodation with all the foreign staff. And these old, the babcias, the grannies would be on the thing. And I thought they were seething at me and glaring at me, and they'd be whispering to each other. I said, oh, they're saying mean things about me. And then as I learned Polish, I realized they do say mean things. But it took time, because I was very resistant to being there. I felt quite down. I thought, I was brought to the local store. It was just full of pickled things. And I was like, what am I going to eat? I came back after my first semester working in Poznan, emaciated, because all I ate was kasha, grain, and Knorr stock cubes. I couldn't adjust at first, but when I went to Krakow, I stepped off the train. I'd taken the night train to Krakow, and I was at home immediately.
I went there for 3 days, and I stayed 2 weeks. It was amazing town. I went, but like being there in 94 was just like just a couple of years out of what are you talking? Maybe 4 years out of communism. It must have been some. And can I ask you just a question on your process? So you said there about you get an idea and you write the first page, or you've done that twice. Once you have that kind of sketch of an idea or for a book or whatever it might be, when you were in Poland, then were you constantly taking notes, or were you kind of interviewing the people you've met in a formalized way, or was it kind of something you were picking up kind of more by osmosis?
I think very much by osmosis. That's kind of the way I work. I don't like formal interviews with people, because I think it makes them feel awkward and they're not being natural. It's like all those photographers in the Himalayas, and they go with their huge lenses up to the local village people. It's so rude. So I like to be like really subtle. And anyway, I had a colleague called Marcin Kolarski, and he worked in Poznan. He was a brilliant philologist, and he invited me for Christmas up to Gdansk, and I met his father, who was an architect, extremely eccentric, but very traumatized by the war. He was a very brilliant restorer. He restored Malbork Castle, which was an old Teutonic castle, and he was clearly some kind of genius, and he was brilliant in art history as well. And he would talk, when he talked to me, I was learning Polish, but he would break into Italian and French and this and that, and it was like, very splintered and very very broken, you know, in many ways, and extremely nervous. He was so nervous to go for Christmas dinner in their friend's house, where we went off to have goose and to sing Christmas carols, that he could hardly get his shoes on. He was so nervous. And when we got into the taxi, he spoke to the taxi driver in Italian. So,
oh, really?
Anyway,
Wow.
he was an architect, and he became a kind of inspiration for Stanislav. But one of the main characters, the first brother in the novel Malinsky, Mr. Kilarski was an inspiration, but he told me amazing stories, like the story in Malinsky where during the war, the local people of Krakow covered the chapel of Wawel Dome, which is golden, pure gold. Wawel Castle is a very historic place on Wawel Hill in Krakow. It's the kind of founding place of the city of Krakow. And it's like a golden chapel, and they covered it all in tar so that the Nazis didn't take the gold, and they tried to hide it. And also, he told me he's a very good artist as well. And he showed me, as soon as the first time I walked into the house, I took my shoes off, as you do in Poland, and he looked at the wall and he showed me his art, and they were all in a kind of moonlight, beautiful pastel drawings, beautiful. And one of them was of Wawel. That's when he told me that story. And he said, "I don't paint in the sunlight, I paint in the moonlight." So he's just a really interesting character, and he's my friend's dad, but he went quite potty, you know. Anyway, he was already going a bit potty. I'd say there's a touch of dementia there. That's probably what was going on, actually, looking back.
And how long was the Polish experience for you then?
Well, 94 into 96, and then back home. But I also moved to India in 97, so I had a very confusing life. I was sent by a Tibetan Lama to study in Dharamsala to be a translator of Tibetan, so I went there in 97. Then I had been writing Malinsky through kind of 96, finished it in 97, went to India, then came back 7-8 months later, and then tried to write another novel, which didn't quite work. And then I moved back after I published Malinsky in Dublin, I moved back to Poland, but I moved to Warsaw, and I really didn't like Warsaw. So I also went to see all my friends in Krakow all the time, and my dear friend Magdalena, who was in Lublin at the time, in East Poland, was very near Ukraine. And then I moved back, and then I moved back again in 2006 when I was I was pregnant with my first child and my only child, and I worked in the Jagiellonia University in Krakow. So I lived again there, and then it was very much a home at that point, you know.
Yes.
My focal point of everything for me in Poland. And the mountains, the Tatra Mountains south, I loved those as well, you know.
And did you go to Lvov when you were writing the book, we'll say in the first run out, we'll say in the 94-96 period?
No, I never did. I just talked to a lot of people who had lived in Lvov or had stories that they came from Lvov, or they were Jews who came from Lvov and they'd survived. The Ukrainians and in the Einsatz group were killing them. Or, you know, obviously there were ones who survived that. It's something that we ought not to forget about Ukraine, that, you know, they did collaborate with the Nazis, a lot of them. I never went to Lvov. There's a lovely story there. You have your breakfast in Krakow, your lunch in Lvov. Lvov was part of Lvov then. Was part of Poland then. So the border shifted then when the Nazis came in, and it became part of the Eastern Territories, and then it became, after the war, part of Russia.
I get you now.
So this is why Putin would have his vision of Ukraine part of Russia.
And I suppose that's what we don't understand a lot of here is how between the two world wars, how often those borders in a lot of countries in Central and Eastern Europe has just kind of moved around.
And they've really suffered, the Ukrainian people, and obviously they're suffering now as well with all this nonsense going on. So, you know, they've been it's a very rich land, actually, and there's a very complicated history with Poland, very complicated history with Russia, you know, and they've been part of, you know, wars for 200 years.
I went down that rabbit hole for a couple of weeks there, and I just got out of it again, because there's a lot going on in that you know, within the borders there that, you know, just doesn't get looked at in any detail.
Yeah.
So when you finished your book, Malinsky, what did you do with it in terms of getting it published? Had you at that point any contacts in the publishing world, or did you set it aside and say not try to get it published, or what happened there?
I think,
or did it get published straight away?
No, not straight away. No, I went off to live in India, and I was studying Tibetan, and I was living in the Himalayas. So I didn't really do anything with it. Went back to India in '99 and worked as a teacher in a Tibetan Cultural Centre in Dharamsala, and then went back up to the mountains and had the absolute time of my life. And also ended up writing Pema and the Yak, this other book. But that was the beginning of that project. See, a lot of projects have crossed over each other. Anyway, by '98, I was back in Ireland, and I took Malinsky out and I sent it off to this new agent, Faith O'Grady, in the Lisa Richards agency in Dublin. At the time, she was in Fitzwilliam Square or Place or something. And then I didn't hear from her. And then I was just passing one day, and I went in, and there was a Tibetan tanka painting, an icon painting over her head. And I thought, that's a good sign. She said, oh, let me look through my slush pile. Oh, there it is. Let me read it. And then she got back to me, and she signed me up on that. And then she got me the deal with Lilliput.
Okay. I find that hilarious what you just told me there now. That because most people, when the process of getting to the end point of a book, and not having like a massive immediate, like I say this admiringly in a sense, not having a massive urge to have it read or have it out there, but rather it sounds like you waited maybe a year or 18 months until that. And I want to get into the whole Tibetans, because I assume that was a spiritual kind of a journey.
Yeah, it was.
Yeah,
it was. Yeah.
But I suppose that's probably a good place to go. So at this point is where were you spiritually in your life?
Well, at the age of my final year in college in UCD, I think it was my sister told me about a Buddhist center in Cavan called Jampaling. And I said, oh, I'd better learn to meditate or I'll get a bit stressed over these finals. And she said, why don't you go up to that place? And so I went up there, and there was just Marjorie. She's now called Anila. She's an ordained nun. She's quite elderly now. Just Marjorie and a chap called James Murray White, and he was playing the Lord of the Manor. He was hilarious, but it didn't really seem very formal or whatever. But Marjorie brought me into the shrine room in Jampaling and just sat me down, and she got me to visualize my thoughts and feelings as clouds in the sky. And the sky was always blue and clear, and it was really profound. And I think I was probably better then in meditation than I am now.
Okay.
I came back really practiced and really, felt I'd found my home. But I wasn't looking for a guru or anything like that. But it was obviously some kind of destiny that the following September, I was at this crux. I was going, well, I don't know whether I should go to New York to use this green card or whether I should go to Poland to get that job I was given in the university. And then I met the Lama, Panchanocha Rinpoche, who's a very eminent kind of Lama, very scholarly kind of compassionate man. The real thing, really. There's a lot that aren't, but he is. Huge gratitude to him for the years that I had as his very close student. And anyway, he said, I don't know how, he had a way of doing things, and he'd just say, oh, I can't even remember what he said. But anyway, I said, I'm going to Poland. Why would I go to America? Even though I'd been on the J1 and I'd absolutely loved it and brilliant time. But I thought, I'm going there. That's where I need to go. So that's how that happened. I don't know if that was your question.
Well, I suppose moving on from there, it was that's kind of an introduction as to how you went down that track spiritually. Yeah. It's quite a big jump then. You seem to be a very comfortable with risk-taking in terms of, I'm thinking back to the mid-90s. It was still quite conservative Ireland, and lots of people were doing, we'll say that the traditional things of going away would have been, as you had the green card, there would have been 50 or 60,000 people that would have murdered you to get a hand to your one, and or London, or somebody.
Oh yeah.
So first you go to Poland and a job, which is kind of ingenious kind of way of thinking, really, and then you decide to go to India and the Himalayas. So tell us what.
Well, I was said, you see, Rinpoche, the Lama, Panchen Rinpoche, he said, now I see you're good at learning languages. Now you go, you did things as you were told when you had a guru. He said, now you're going to Dharamsala to study Tibetan, and you're going to be a translator for me. And that was, and I was like, whoa. But I was so happy to have a reason to go to India, because I had a huge interest in going there anyway. So I went to Dharamsala on a rattly old bus from Delhi, and I got up there and was studying in the Library of Tibetan Works and Archives, which is a big, huge library in lower Dharamsala, where the Parliament buildings are, in exile and stuff. And then I realized, oh, I don't think I'm going to be a translator, because then I might have to be a nun, and I might have to live in a Dharma center, and I might have to be with Rinpoche for the rest of my life. I got a bit freaked out. So I went, but I loved learning the language. So I kept learning it. And then I went higher and higher into the Himalayas as the rains came to Dharamsala. And I hate rain and I hate mold. And that's what happens in Dharamsala. And it's worse than here, even when the rains come. So a lovely old Indian man called Raj, he said, oh, this is when the rains come, we all go to the mountains. You know, it was like being back in Kipling's time or something. And so I took a rattly old bus there up to the Tibetan border. It's like, oh my goodness, this lunar landscape of Spiti Valley. So much of the book Pema and the Yak, which is also available as Lost in Shambhala as a Amazon Kindle, much of that is, well, that's the story of my connection to Rinpoche and where I was sent by him. But it's also the story of many, many Tibetan exiles. And I did interview them. I collected their stories, and I wanted to do it for them. Because actually the first night in Dharamsala, I had a dream. And it was this nomad called Pema and the yak coming over the mountains to India. And there I was again. It's like, oh, Christ. And my agent said, what are you doing? Why are you writing this now? You're supposed to be writing more literary fiction. It's like, I don't know. Okay. I have to do this.
Yeah, but that's a kind of a natural. It's not a surprise like an artistic person. A genuinely one would be like, that wouldn't be a surprise to me. But you, so basically, are you writing your second book before before Malinsky is published?
No.
Or had met.
No, I had, well, before it was published, yes, I started to get Arts Council's grants to go back to India, to all these border regions in India on the Tibetan border. And I spent a lot of time, I worked for the Tibetan government and did different things that would enable me to be there. But I also had these grants from the Arts Council, who were always incredibly generous and supportive. But I used to live on a shoestring. Well,
no, I can imagine. And back then, whatever supports there would have been, there wouldn't have been super, they'd have been frugal enough. But you must be on somebody's radar to be getting Arts Council grants and stuff like that. How would that have come about?
Well, you know, that's an art form in itself, getting Arts Council grants. So I kind of learned it very quickly. I remember as early as 96 applying for my first thing, and then getting the letter in the post going, woohoo, I got like 750 quid. And off I'd go to India for 6 months and I'd live on that.
Yeah.
You could live another. I mean, sorry, it's my son who just came home.
That's all right.
So yeah, you could live really cheaply in India. You would have room for €2 a night, or if I was in the Library of Tibetan Works and Archives in Dharamsala, it would be like, you know, like maximum €100 a month.
Oh no, I don't mean but in terms of what are you saying to the Arts Council that you're going to produce?
Oh yes, no, I would always be very clear. Like, I'm doing this, and I'm writing this book about Tibetans living in exile. It's a travelogue, and here's a few chapters that I've already done. So give me some money, please. And they were always really supportive.
Yeah. No, it's good to hear.
Yeah, no, they are, but I'm very lucky to be in the loop with that, because if you're not in the loop with that, it's very hard to get in. As you know, a lot of artists know, like I know people who became artists later in life, it's really hard.
Yeah. I will believe it. And had you any Irish mentors at that stage of kind of writers, or was there any writers that would have kind of you'd have gravitated towards in your own reading, or whether they might have brought you in under their wing in life?
No.
My
dad.
Okay, your dad.
Yeah, he was a journalist and a writer.
Oh,
but really,
yes.
I just felt really, from the time I moved over to Poland, I felt like I didn't belong here anymore. And it was a strange feeling. I'd come back here and I'd witness Ireland going through the Celtic Tiger and go, what is this country now? I don't like this. And people would say, oh, you're writing a book, are you? Oh, is it tough? and I go, no. Well, then you can't really say you're a writer. And I go, ah, feck off. But in Poland, if I said I was writing a book, they'd be like, that's really cool. That's brilliant. And they didn't care about the monetary thing, but everyone's monetizing everything already here. And I was just like, oh, get me out of here. Like,
And do you miss it to a degree, Poland?
Yeah.
Or are you over it?
No, I go back very frequently. I was back quite recently, and I went last year, and I would usually go every year, especially with my son. And we have, we go to see Magdalena, that original friend. We're very close to her still. We've other really good friends there. I've got a couple of friends there who are like, they're really into Joyce, but like not just into Joyce, they're freaking geniuses who she did her PhD on the Slavonic elements and the semantics of like Finnegan's Wake. Sure, I haven't even read it.
I tried to read it and give up.
Geniuses. She's just amazing. And I brought them. They did an adaptation of Finnegan's Wake to the stage, and I brought that over in '96 to Dublin to the Fringe Festival, and that really took off for them. They then went off to other theatre festivals and stuff. It was great.
Yeah. And so the Indian Himalayan experience and the Tibetan experience, was the violence there at that stage? Is it Tibet that had the huge genocide?
Yeah, that's been going on since 1949 when the PLA moved in. And Dalai Lama then, by 59, he was going into exile, and he had to leave one night undercover after the 10th of March 1959 Lhasa uprising. And he left, and he came out on a donkey or horse or something, and in disguise, as did many followed him, 150,000 to 200,000 and more over the years. And then Jawaharlal Nehru in India, the prime minister at the time, he gave them large tracts of land all over in Orissa in the east and Karnataka in the south, huge settlements with huge monasteries, libraries. They have a whole world in exile in India. But a lot of Tibetans in the last sort of 20, 30 years are just kind of wanting to get their visas to go to America or to the West,
Yeah.
So there's a different kind of thing. Some of them are a bit spoiled by Western sponsorship and stuff,
Yeah. And I suppose that whole time period, how long had you spent there for that period of time?
Well, I first went to India in '97, and then I spent 7 or 8 months there. Then I went back in '99, again working in Dharamsala, but studying not so formally. And then I thought I need to get back because I had met a teacher in that remote valley, Spiti Valley. And he said, I will teach you if you come back to this monastery, which was like unbelievably remote on a craggy rock. There was no windows, there's no glass in the windows, and there's big wind howling down the river valley. But I was so happy. I just seemed to want to get as far away from civilization or normal life as possible. And I felt incredibly free. And the irony of living in these villages on the Tibetan border was that I felt that when I was looking at these old women villagers with the basket on their back and collecting dung and singing songs in the field, I thought, well, those are like our people were prior to every modernization, in Ireland. And they were telling stories around the fire, and they were telling stories of the Bangmo, the old witch, describing her like the archetypal witch. They were in all seriousness, and that house there, you see, nobody lives there because bad spirits came and they killed everybody with an illness. And that's not that long ago in Ireland that people believe things like that.
Oh, absolutely not. I was in a couple's house yesterday, and their kind of gone off the grid, but it reminded me of my uncle's house. And that's maybe 50 years ago. It was just no electricity, just these houses with just 3-room houses. I've noticed, or maybe I'm wrong, or maybe I'm missing a book of yours, but your fictional writing, your experiences abroad have inspired fictional books, but Ireland hasn't.
No, didn't I write a book about Kevin Barry?
Yeah, but that's not fictional.
No, that's right, yeah. No. Well, Fenella, the first novel, was set, basically in a house in Dillery, which was my grandparents' house.
All right, okay.
But I guess I've always felt a bit like, where do I actually belong? I don't really. My mum was born in London. Her father was Australian. Her mum was from Texas. And they carried that feeling of, we don't belong here, despite my grandfather having Irish ancestry, not too many generations back, but was brought up in Sydney, was a really good architect. And I don't know, my mom sort of carried that feeling of, I don't really belong here. And so I guess maybe I kind of inherited that, even though my dad's side of the family were through and through Irish Republican and all that,
Yeah.
So I always had this feeling that I wanted to get away from here for some reason. I still kind of do, but I don't, the way a lot of people just want to live in another country because there's less burden or something. There's a lot of history here. And my dad would have gone on and on and on about Irish history and, the ancestors and my, Kevin Barry, who was my great uncle, and my grandfather, and all the things they got up to. And I was like, oh my God, get me out of here. Like, I just couldn't take it. It was so much to digest. But then when Dad died in 2009, I said, right, I'm going to get his book on Kevin Barry, which published in 1989. I'm going to get that republished. And that became a huge project for me. I ended up writing a new book about Kevin Barry because there's new material. So I published that with Current Books in 2020. But Dad was with me every step of the way, I feel. So he's the only Irish mentor that I really had. I don't remember. I remember going to a writers' festival in Romania 2 years in a row, the Ovidius Festival, and there was an Irish contingency, and there was Colm to Be and people like that. And then there was an Israeli one. They decided that I was one of them because my name is also Hebrew. So they said, "You're one of us. You're one of them." I hung out with them the whole time. It was great fun. It was more interesting because I, get sick of the Irish. I don't mean to be unpatriotic. I shouldn't. So but I just kind of like being in other places, get a bit of breathing space.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? But I'm falling in love with Ireland as well, again, in a way, because, detestable as the lockdowns were and oppressive as they were, a lot of people have connected. And thanks to people like you, Jerry, people have connected and connected and connected with these, circles within circles of amazing connections. And in some ways, I've never felt as at home here. But I still get these bouts of claustrophobia and, I'd love to run away to India. I'd love to be in the sun or, live in some Mediterranean place. But sure, most people say this is one of the best places to be.
Yeah, I don't know. I can't see myself retiring here. And I never thought I'd say that. I just can't see it. Anyway, you kind of remind me, I'll get to what you remind me of later, actually. I didn't mention to everybody watching that Síofra, on purpose, that Síofra is Kevin Barry's grandniece, because I think that is one whole thing in its own. And you're, without any of that, you're a very interesting person, and your books are very interesting. Especially since I kind of got the Malinsky book, and also from your presentation. Now, what I wanted to ask you is, at what point is writing as a creative coach coming into your thoughts?
Yeah, right. That's more like, I guess.
Is that a recent development?
No, it's like 17 years ago.
Okay.
2004 up to 6, I was working in County Louth. I was working as the writer in residence. Absolutely had a wonderful time. Also collecting folklore there, did a kind of folklore project, and then I put all those into Louth County Archives. We kind of ran out of funding to publish a book, but it was really interesting. And that's another time I guess I started to fall in love with Ireland, and just the magic of people and their stories, just amazing. And I was part of an experiment. The arts officer Brian Horton put me as an experiment in the JA club in Cullen County Louth to see what would happen. And all the alphas said, well, we're not going to write anything. And I said, grand. I said, I'll just interview you and you can tell me your stories. So that's what happened. But then I ran workshops all over the county. I ran them in RD and Carlingford and Dundalk, and it was brilliant as well. Brilliant experience,
And had you do you have any familial connection with Louth, or how were you living in Louth at that stage, or how does that work?
No, I just applied for the job and I got on really well with the arts officer and the panel in there, and I was just kind of just totally being myself, not having a clue whether I get the job, but I did. But interestingly, somebody called Michael Ryan, who later became my sister's partner, he introduced me to lots of fascinating people. I'd known him because I knew his daughter in NCAD, and she was a very good friend of my best friend in NCAD. And so I ended up meeting a whole circuit of really interesting people up there who were really into, they were into folklore. There's a huge, as you probably know, movement of Bridget, what would you call it? Bridget worship. I don't know what you call it. Which as well. You had an amazing priest up there. He's kind of wild, renegade, rebel priest who was genius. Like he could speak Hebrew, or he knew Hebrew, he knew Sanskrit. Tom Hamill, his father, Tom Hamill, he's died in 2020. I'm really sorry that I didn't get to see him properly that year. But he'd had several strokes, and now he's gone. But met just great people up there as well. There was a guy called Veer Cunningham who's still there. He's got a house called Annaverna House, and he had artists living in the stables and the attic and everything. And he wanted to have a kind of Anna McCarrick, but that kind of never happened. But it's a beautiful Georgian house in a place called Ravensdale in Dundalk. So I lived there from, I guess, 2006 to 2007, and then I had my first baby, or the only baby, who's now very large.
I can bet. So you mentioned the Louth, and then the Wicklow and Louth were the two where you worked as a kind of a how would you describe it? Literary writer in residence.
Yeah, no, I wasn't a writer in residence in Wicklow. I was writer in residence in Louth, and Wicklow were very just county council. The arts officer again was very supportive. I got bursaries to research different books, and one book I'd like to mention that's very dear to my heart, it's one of the favorite books I've ever written, is a book called Dark Forest, and that's set in 12th century France, and that links in some ancestors as well, but it's wildly different. It's a sort of historical fantasy, and that's kind of my thing that I'm obsessed with now.
So that's what you're writing at the moment?
I finished it, but I signed up with an agent at the beginning of 2020, and not a whole lot has happened because of all the things that have happened, I guess. So I'm just dying to get that out there. That's my dream. I'm dying to get that out there. And that
is that a different? Yes, right.
I taught the most bizarre writing workshops you probably ever would encounter. I call them the unicorn writing workshops. Again, came from a dream, but I got the images of all the unicorn tapestries, the French ones, the medieval ones, and they're in the MoMA in New York, I think. And each week we'd work from a different tapestry, and for me it was a phenomenal creative experience because this book was born, like it just became a narrative week to week. The hunting of the unicorn, and those images of the unicorn being. It was sort of an image of Christ. I think that the unicorn was thrown out of the Council of Trent. They said, well, they don't exist, but there's references to them in the Bible. So this is hugely important in my novel, which is set in the 12th century, that the unicorn is the time travel device for the girl who, the book starts for some random reason in Vancouver, and she ends up, 21st century Vancouver, she ends up in 12th century France, but she kind of morphs into her own ancestor. And then it was hard to kind of track the change in consciousness. But I kind of got it, because I think I've got it now. But like, there's a Canadian woman who lives nearby me, actually lives in a field with her partner. They're really cool people. You should meet them. They're great foragers. But she is Canadian, and she read a few chapters, and she gave me such a brilliant, feedback, and oh yeah, okay, this quirky family who this girl comes from, in Vancouver, a suburb of Vancouver, they're like, they eat lots of game. And she said, I don't know if you can eat game. She asked her aunt, she said, yeah, you can eat game in Vancouver. And she mentioned all the butchers that sold it. That kind of thing brings a book to life. But anyway, I did a lot of research for that as well. Got an Arts Council grant to go out to see all the places it was set in: Aquitaine, in Poitiers, in the Loire Valley, in Chinon. and it was about the daughter of Eleanor of Aquitaine and Louis VII, the French king. And she divorced him because they didn't have any sons. And then 8 weeks later, she married Henry II Plantagenet, and they had loads of babies and they had loads of sons. And then she plotted a rebellion against her own husband with her sons, because he was just being so selfish and mean, and he wouldn't give them their lands and stuff. And they plotted a rebellion, and then this novel takes place during that rebellion, and but it's kind of background as well, because it's a love story. It's about a girl who's in love with a poet in the court who, but she knows that she's due to be arranged. There's an arranged marriage to a duke, and she doesn't want to marry somebody she doesn't know, and she doesn't want to marry a stupid duke. So it turns out that this poet is actually Oh, I shouldn't say. I suppose spoiler.
I was going to stop you, but I said, this is great. Yeah, so yeah, I'll just charge people €5 for this conversation. What I wanted to say to you, you picked the settings of, say, Malinsky in this book. They must be hugely difficult. You must enjoy kind of the research element of books, because there must be huge research involved in. Yeah. Am I correct in saying from what you said there, that this is kind of a stream of consciousness kind of we'll say style?
No, not really. The only one that was stream of consciousness that I ever wrote was the first novel, Fenella. That's sort of lyrical and stream of consciousness, but the rest are all very structured. And,
okay.
You know.
And the research for, like, you're going back to the 12th century, so you know.
Oh, like, yeah, loads of research went into that. Loads of research.
And do I detect that you kind of like that?
Yeah, definitely, I do. I love rummaging around, finding things. It was really funny though, because when my dad died, we were going through his study, and there was a book about Eleanor of Aquitaine by Alison Weir. She also wrote a novel about Eleanor of Aquitaine. But it was kind of a random thing to find in Dad's study, because it was all like Irish republicanism and nationalism and all this kind of stuff. So I was like, why did he have that? I didn't think he'd any interest. But weirdly, I discovered after Dad died, I looked into my mum's genealogy through America, through her mum, and it turns out the whole line goes back to Eleanor of Aquitaine. It's kind of weird. So I feel like, yeah. So I was kind of really fascinated by her then. She's an amazing, amazing figure in history. She was the wealthiest, apparently the most beautiful, but the wealthiest and most powerful woman in Europe. She had so much in her. She was Duchess of Aquitaine. And she also patronized, with her daughter Marie de Champagne, who is the character in the novel. She patronized the early, writers who wrote the Arthurian legends, and they're kind of like the first, like Chrétien and Troyes, and the first novels, the stories of Guinevere and Lancelot. All of that came through the French courts. It came through other places in Europe as well, but that had a particular flavor and style that really took off. So there's a lot of kind of references to that, but no, it's not. Nothing academic, like it's just, I actually read Chrétien and Troyes, but only in translation. And so you'd actually get the detail of like what it was like when they were in their duels, and, what kind of tree there was in the background, and real kind of details, very clunky stuff, but it's interesting,
Yeah, it is very. How do you approach dialogue in that kind of a book? In terms of
I just make it natural.
But natural modern or natural kind of medieval in the language?
No, because anybody who's writing historical fiction would probably avoid using any archaic language. It's got to be in modern language, just to make it kind of real, and engaging, especially for young readers, because essentially this book is for young adults. It's not really, it could be for adults as well, but, it's kind of written for that more like sort of young teens or whatever. But that kind of thing, historical fantasy, is kind of, since Game of Thrones, that's really super popular.
Oh, it's huge. Yeah, I mean, it is. I enjoy reading it. I don't know. I forgot, just off the top of my head, Imperium. Richard Harris, Thomas Harris, one of them that does the Roman, that basically did 2 books on Cicero. I can't remember the titles of them now, but so yeah, I enjoy that type of reading, that type of fiction. So for Before we go any further now, we better talk about your course because we're nearly an hour chatting away here and I haven't got into it. Let's start with the concept, or how you came into the concept of hero's journey, heroine's journey as a kind of thematic for a creative writing course.
Yeah. Well, it's sort of necessity is the mother of invention. I just sort of developed different kinds of courses, which I thought I could, earn money in a very enjoyable way. And so somebody had given me a copy of The Hero with a Thousand Faces a long time ago. So it became, suddenly it became relevant. And I think it was because I did a screenwriting course in the children's book I wrote, which is another thing. I'm not going to talk about that now because it's too many things. I'm talking about too many things. But in the script writing course, basically, he taught the hero's journey as the narrative template. And that's where I started to realize, oh my God, this could really work for people, whatever. And I'm also really interested in the hero's journey as a self-reflective tool. I've worked in prisons. I've worked in Portlaoise prison. I've worked in Arbor Hill. And, I really would like to go in for longer into the prisons to, see it through as a tool for self-reflection on their own lives. It really can work.
As a rehabilitation tool.
Absolutely. And it works for people. I've had quite a lot of people who are in recovery do my courses, who've gained a lot from them. And just the act of writing in a safe, contained space, because I bring people into a meditation, kind of relaxation, and then I give them some imagery, and then they go from there. And I don't think once or twice somebody mightn't be able to engage, but very rarely. And so that really seems to work. And then from the hero's journey, I developed the heroine's journey, which is Maureen Murdoch's, based on Maureen Murdoch's work in her book, because she said, oh, well, there has to be heroine's journey because she's a bit pissed off Joseph Campbell because she thought he was a bit of a chauvinist. And he said, whoa, the modern woman, the hero's journey, she on that journey, she is the grail. And she's like, no, that does not thing. That doesn't resonate with me. So she wrote the heroine's journey, which is kind of like feminism of its time, but she has a lot of interesting myths and reflections on what the heroine's journey is, separation from the mother, and using things like the myth of Demeter and Persephone and the abduction by Hades. And I do a lot of myth within that one, a lot of myth, but the hero's journey is just straight narrative. Each week we would do a step of the hero's journey. We'd be crossing the threshold.
And just go into just for people that mightn't be familiar with that, just the steps, the steps from start to finish, bullet points, how you approach it.
The hero has a call to adventure. So think of Luke Skywalker. Okay. You have to think of Star Wars because George Lucas consulted Joseph Campbell for the writing of these stories and the script. So you have Luke Skywalker is called to, by Obi-Wan Kenobi, you have tasks to do. He's like, what? I don't want to do that. So that's the refusal of the call. He goes back to his village. The village is burnt down. He has no choice. It's like a universe. It's a contract. It's predestined. He's got to cross the threshold. On the threshold, you have guardians of the threshold. You have your challenges, but you're going to help. Your mentor will help you get over that threshold. Then you're into the belly of the whale. You're plunged into the other world, and then you have there's like Act 2 is like all the exposition of the action, the challenges, the chase, the hunting, by your enemies. And then you're always looking for your boon. So you receive the boon, you kind of face the dragon. In Star Wars, that's Luke Skywalker faces Darth Vader down, and then he realizes he's looking at himself. So it's all quite kind of profound in Star Wars as well. And you've got your Yoda, and he's another kind of mentor type. Anyway, then the hero must integrate everything and then cross the return threshold and return then to home. And have all that integrated. And you can, once you know this, you can look at all the films you watch and even romantic comedies. You look at, or even, what do you call the famous detective story? What do you call that famous detective story? Baker Street. What do you call this guy?
Oh, yeah. Sherlock Holmes.
Yeah, Sherlock Holmes.
Can I just get you to turn the screen a little because you're slightly falling off screen there.
Oh, sorry. Yeah,
that's perfect. Thanks for that. So for in terms of the course that's starting in next week, what type of person, what's involved, how many weeks, how often, and what type of person is kind of the ideal candidate for your hero's journey?
Yeah, well, first of all, anybody who's interested in being creative through writing and who wants support for their writing process and a firm kind of structure, but also a kind of, container that's loose enough for them to be able to express themselves safely and freely and enjoyably. Basically, the practical elements of this hero's journey starting on Thursday the 7th is that, first of all, very importantly, it's hybrid. You can do it by Zoom or you can do it in person. So once you are interested, I'll tell you the venue. It's going to be around the kind of Bray Greystones area. That the course is 8 weeks long, Thursdays 10 to 12 in the morning. I know that's not ideal for everyone, but I always have support during the week. I send out emails and there's writing exercises and interesting material that I send as well. And it's like if somebody couldn't make it for a course or whatever, for a session, it would be recorded as well, so that makes it easier. A lot of people like to do that as well.
Yeah, so there's basically reading material, recorded material, and you're kind of sending out prompts or exercises during each week or each stage.
Yeah.
Okay.
I do a lot, so I really engage with the group, and Zoom is a funny old one if you're doing it on Zoom, but I'm doing it in person as well, but that can be an interesting combination. But Zoom is just like a series of square boxes, whereas in a room we have an actual circle, and that's very powerful. But like I just ran a heroine's journey on Zoom, and that worked really well. And I was saying, like, there you are, you're a bunch of squares, but actually it feels like a circle because it really took off and it was great.
Yeah, no, I like people are comfortable with video conference and video whatever for the last 2 years. I suppose that's one thing. It's not an alien concept to people now. So how do they get in touch with you, Siofra? What's the best way to book this and how, that kind of thing?
You can go onto my website, www.siofrao'donovan.com, or you can there's a contact form in there, and that's a really good way of contacting me. Or I have a page called The Hero's Journey on Facebook, so you can ask to join that page. It's a group rather than a page, actually. And then there's Serpentine Workshop Adventures, Writing Workshop Adventures. That's an actual page. But the best way is really to go through the website. Yeah.
Okay, and that's great. Now the next thing I want to ask you, what of your published books, how many are available to buy? Because this is another thing I'm hugely fascinated in, is print runs and stuff like that of published books. So how many of your books, if somebody's watching this and they wanted to buy Malinsky, or they wanted to buy, we haven't even talked about your Kevin Barry biography yet, how do they do it, or what's in the real world, online, or how does that process work?
Okay, so Malinsky, you can just go to Amazon. You get a copy, either paperback or hardback. There's still copies floating around. Kevin Barry is, well, the publisher said it's kind of, the hardback is sold out, but I'm actually in the process of rewriting it, revising it, because I have a whole lot of new material that was 4 boxes of my grandfather's stuff. He was very high up in the IRA, and he wrote his own book on Kevin Barry. So there's a lot of interesting material that's going to be going into the new edition of the book, which is coming out in September 2022. So I'll be putting that up on my website as well. I'll be having a couple of book launches. I might actually have one down in Clare, because Sinead down in Ennistimon.
Absolutely, yeah, absolutely, yeah. She's great.
Yeah.
What was I going to say? So that's an interesting thing that's coming up in the near term, is the paperback version of Kevin Barry. So we should really dive into that a bit, because I was kind of leaving it to last because I didn't want it to kind of overshadow anything.
Well, that's going to be fun, because it's kind of exciting that there's these papers. The publisher said, I don't really want to do a paperback unless you can get your hands on that material. And so it was weirdly difficult to get access, but actually Dermot Ferreter helped me, and the head archivist, Kate Manning, helped me a lot. And I was able to go in there before it's catalogued and spend hours and hours, well, basically photographing, because I'm blind as a bat, and then putting it onto the big iPad and going, oh, I can see it now. So I spent the last few months transcribing all that material, and now I'm inserting the material into the book.
Okay. Why was it difficult? Why was it difficult to get access?
Well, that's a long story, and I might get into trouble if I say this publicly, so I better not. But not only because it had been deposited into UCD archives by a relative. Okay, I'm not going to say any more than that because I don't want to.
Okay. So that process grants certain rights.
And now it wasn't catalogued, but because of my connection, it was my granddad, and because of the nature of what I was doing, I talked to Dermot Ferret about it, and he very kindly talked to Kate Manning and said, could you help her because she needs access to this urgently, you know.
That's good.
From September through December I was kind of doing that and stuff, and that was really, really cool. And it's hard old work though, and I'm kind of sick of constantly working on Kevin Barry. So I've also got a screenplay that I've written with a friend called Lisa McNamara, and we're trying to get that out as well. So there's a lot of stuff on the go. But I'd love to get away from Kevin Barry eventually and focus on the 12th century France novel.
Do you generally find yourself working on 2 or 3 different things at a time? Are you that type of?
Well, not really. I'd have to, like with this book, I've just thought, okay, I really have to just finish, the revision on the Kevin Barry book before I do anything else. And it's a bit claustrophobic for me, but I have to do it. And I have a deadline as well with Curragh Books. So the other book, Is
there going to be an audio version of this book?
Yeah, well, actually, at the moment, the NCBI are putting it into, they're recording it. And I know you've mentioned Audible to me before, and I'm going to look into that for Malinsky and Penman and the Ark as well.
Absolutely, because
I
suppose because no, it's just in terms of getting paid basically.
Exactly.
The process. Can I? If you don't want to answer this question, that's fine. But we'll say your first book that was published and you get an advance. Is that a day you can say, right, I'm a writer and I can afford to write? I don't need to worry about stuff, and I can sit back and
I don't think that day comes through unless you're J.K. Rowling or John le Carre. That doesn't come for most writers. You know what I mean? You do it really because you love it, as you know. You really do.
And is this so why do you you love it? Okay.
Yeah.
So you're always in a situation throughout your life where you're supplementing your writing. You have to find projects to supplement your writing. Is that how it's worked for you? With the Arts Council or various different things.
Well, I think that's why organizations like the Arts Council exist and must exist to support artists, and they do a great job mostly. But some people mightn't agree because it isn't an easy thing to get into. But you do things that are related to your work as well. You do writing workshops. I love teaching writing workshops, and I've loved working in prisons, but that hasn't been happening in a couple of years. There has been a lot of supplementing for sure. But I mean, there's lots of people Joyce was penniless, and Beckett was penniless. So I don't know if he's penniless, but Franz Kafka was a civil servant, and lots of people, even who are successful, I mean, have to be still keeping a day job. But I have bitty jobs here and there. I teach here, there, and everywhere, but I kind of rather that than just one place. I'm a trained secondary school teacher as well, but did that in UCD, said never again.
I did it as well, yeah. Have you ever thought of going down the 3rd level academic route? You seem to be talking to you now. You wouldn't look out of place on a lecture floor.
No, you see, I just don't like big institutions. I'm naturally too rebellious. I don't like.
So you're like myself, addicted to poverty.
No, I'm not going to agree with you there. I don't think I am addicted to poverty. I think I see better times coming, and you must too. You will.
Yeah.
You know,
Yeah.
you
No, I'm,
will.
I'm only joking. I'm only joking.
But Joseph Campbell said, "Follow your bliss,"
I
and
know,
that comes
absolutely.
from the Indian philosophy, Sat Chit Ananda. You can't know your consciousness. You can't know. I can't remember the second thing, but the third thing is Ananda, which is bliss, and you follow that. And
Mhm.
okay, maybe I don't have oodles of money, but I'm happy doing this.
No, my theory,
You do too.
my problem is not, my problem was with the business model of publishing is what I have a
Yeah.
problem with is that, but I think it's changing rapidly, so I don't think it's going to be a problem for much longer.
Yeah, well, I'd love to chat to you more about that and your audible ideas and all of that. There are new ways, there definitely are.
Mhm.
I'm still too traditional the way I think about it.
Yeah, but like it's also the way it's it's the all of the kind of critical acclaim comes through the traditional methodology of doing stuff.
Yeah,
Even the award systems for books, even
yeah.
even the literary, granting of literary stuff, they'd look the way I'd feel is they'd look kindly on somebody that has gone through the university, maybe master's route of literature, when it come to that stuff, rather than maybe somebody that's sitting
I
up on a
don't, I
mountain.
don't, I don't think they care so much anymore. I mean, they just want somebody who's going to write a bestseller, and they don't care really anymore about that. I wouldn't say, really, honestly, especially young writers. They'd be like, you know, wow, like a Zadie Smith or something. They're like, she's cool. Maybe she does have a traditional education. I don't know much about her, but the white teeth lady, she did pretty well.
Yeah, yeah, I wrote her. I think she wrote Autograph Man or something. I've read one of her books.
Yeah.
But no, that's it. That's very true. Probably, I'm just thinking. I'm sure I haven't a clue. I'm only thinking out loud about the
Well,
way they are.
sure.
They
I
are.
mean, my dad used to publish his own books. He had his own publishing thing called Kilbride Books, and he literally lived in the attic. And he published somebody else's book. Charles Acton, who's a music critic for the Irish Times, published his book. But your dad never made a penny out of his book. So I think I need to break out of that paradigm. And then I found all my poor grandfather's rejection letters for his book on Kevin Barry. Now, I was
Oh,
very lucky to get that book deal in 2020 that I did. You know what I mean? But
mm-hmm.
dad publishing, like, it wasn't great. His experience with Glendale Press, they quickly remaindered his book and they didn't promote it properly, and disappointing kind of experiences. And he wrote his memoirs as well, called Little Old Man Cut Short, and made a deal with a guy in Bray who had a company called Kestrel Books, and I think the warehouse of books went on fire or something. He just had disasters, poor dad.
Yeah, but there's three generations so of basically people that
Yes.
literary figures in your chain of
Yeah, but
lineage.
3 generations of people who wrote books about Kevin Barry, which is what was interesting to me, that kind of lineage. But yeah, there's a bunch of other writers as well. On my mum's side, there was a Presbyterian pastor who wrote novels, fire and brimstone novels. One called
Okay.
Confederate Spy, Robert Haskins Crozier. He was an interesting character. And then there was another priestly chap on dad's side of the family. His great uncle, Father Gerald O'Donovan, wrote Father Ralph and other novels. Ran away from the priesthood in 1908 or something in Ireland. He was the curate of Loughrea, married a Protestant woman called somebody Verschoyle, went to live in
Mm-hmm.
London, and not only that, but had an affair for most of his married life with Rose Macaulay, who was in the Bloomsbury Circle. So he was a very interesting chap. So,
Yeah, the church could accommodate that characters like that.
the family all wrote him off. They said he died at sea. He died.
I'm trying to think where Bishop Casey ended up. He didn't end up in Loughrea, but he ended up in a village very close to
Oh,
it.
did he?
Yeah, that's where he was. When that scandal broke, Bishop
Yeah.
Casey, obviously he went off somewhere, but he ended up as he ended up back in Galway in like a small cure as a
Right.
kind
I
of
know. I
demoted
I
as a
never sort
cure.
of felt he was as hateful as other priests, because I thought it was sort of forgivable almost that he had an affair with a woman, and he actually paid her maintenance and he was kind of nice to her. Do you know what I mean? Whereas other
Mm,
priests did other ghastly things. We don't want to talk about that now, but I thought he wasn't the worst. sort of.
It was, yeah, like it was, yeah. Yeah, there was other stuff that
Obviously there's a lot of hypocrisy involved with that, but like they are human beings, and the paedophilia is unforgivable. It's never forgivable, and they're not above the law. They think they are because they have canon law. But with Casey, I always thought, no, he wasn't the worst of them. Do you know what I mean? He was human.
He was the water, but I suppose he was the watershed. He brought us. He was the one that wrecked. He was the final kind of
right
Jenga piece that fucking collapsed it. As far as the way I'd look at it, no, and I agree. Like I agree with you, in that sense. In that case, there have been
in the Casey case,
in the Casey case with Annie Murphy. In that case, but the other subsequent stuff came out after that. I don't know how true or false that stuff was, but in that particular case, that's the way I've kind of felt as well. But it just was the seminal moment for Irish Catholicism in Ireland, like in
the
30
bubble
years.
burst then.
It was exactly the bubble burst. But how did we get talking about that now? Yes, you were talking about so that priest is kind of that guy or that person was a writer as well, was he, that priest?
Father Gerald, he was a writer who went to live in London. You see, that's why they all said he died at sea. Well, because he left the priesthood and it was so shameful and blah blah blah. But he was very interested in the Celtic arts, the Celtic revival, and he knew Lady Gregory, he knew all the people, and he saw a lot of problems in the church, and he criticized them, and they didn't like that. So he left, and then he went to live in London, and he really was very much in love with Rose Macaulay for most of his married life. So he was very unconventional. Do you know what I mean? He really was.
But they were also, so that's the Loughrea connection, because Lady Gregory was Gort. So her biggest state.
Yes, and you're from near there. That's right.
Well, Loughrea, and if he ended up in Loughrea, he'd have been quite close as well.
Well, you would go, if you went into Loughrea now, you'd see, I think, some of his vestments. And I had a portrait of him that my mum gave me, but I gave it to the National Portrait, the National Portrait Collection in the National Gallery, and it's a fantastic portrait. It used to spook me out as a child. He's like, painted by Dermot O'Brien, he's quite well known, but he's like in his priest gear, and it was such a brilliant portrait that the eyes would follow me around the room. Oh my God, is he So again, it really freaked me out, you know. So when Mum gave it to me, I sort of said, I don't know if I can handle this for the rest of my life.
Yeah.
You know, it'd be more fun if he was sort of like being a writer in London and having the crack.
And which side do you think your creative side comes from? Like where do you, I sense you're more like your mother's side of the family, or do you think it's just a mix? Even though the lineage on Harry and all that stuff is your father. Creatively
on my
speaking.
mother's side. Creatively speaking, because like Dad was never kind of into fiction or whatever. Mum was very artistic, and my grandma was a kind of very colourful character, the grandma from Dallas, and Granddad was an architect and an artist, and then his sister was a brilliant sculptor, and then I guess there was a lot of arty stuff on Mum's side of the family, and then but they're kind of quite a few writers on Dad's side too, but maybe not so kind of creative, more but I mean Father Gerald was very
well,
you might look him up. There's a new version of there's a new biography of him, but it isn't it's sort of academic, but it's interesting enough. But Michael Harding, you know Michael Harding? Well, he was in the world of Jampoling. I was around a lot when he was around, and he said to me, Michael Harding was a priest who left the priesthood to become a writer. And he said that my great uncle was great great uncle, whatever he was a great inspiration to him, because his first novel was about the priest who had the crisis of identity. Can't do this anymore, and describing Maynooth and all that. So
Yeah.
Michael Hardy's the only writer, or the only person really in Ireland that I ever met who actually had heard of my great uncle.
He'd be he's an interesting character himself. Like he did the Bull in the
Oh
Cave
yeah.
as well, didn't he? In a
Um,
play before
uh,
lockdown.
no, Michael Harding did a lot of plays now before he became famous for his memoirs Staring at Lakes, which was about a midlife crisis, because it was a very brutally honest kind of a memoir about middle-age crisis, midlife crisis. He also described his journeys to India and to Mongolia with Rinpoche, who's my teacher as well, Tibetan Lama.
Yeah.
It all links up.
And
So
he has a Polish connection too, I think.
yes, yeah. I couldn't even believe it when he told me that his grandmother was Polish. I actually didn't believe when he told me that. But he said that's where his love of theatre came, and he wrote fantastic plays that were on the Peacock and the Abbey and everything. But they never took off because the snobby old middle class Dubliners like, we didn't want to know about the north of Ireland. Do you know what I mean? That attitude. Whereas he was writing, oh, it's brilliant. His plays are absolutely brilliant. I love Michael Harding. He's a great guy. Yeah.
Yeah, that's. I haven't even thought of him since before the lockdown.
He would have spent long stretches in Anna McCarrick in the Tyrone Guthrie Centre as well. Like that's how loads of us met.
Because he's based up in Leitrim or Cavan, is he?
Yeah, he's up near, I think, from Shambo. Yeah.
That's Leitrim.
Yeah.
So speaking of lockdowns, how did you find it creatively?
Well, I was kind of lucky, I guess, in one way because, I was on my way to Japan, stopped my tracks, and I had been co-writing a book about Kevin Barry with somebody else whose name I won't even mention, but it kind of fell apart just before the lockdown, and I was devastated. And I thought, what am I going to do? I'm going to have to take my material back, and I'm going to have to publish my own book about Kevin Barry. But how am I going to do that? And I said, I don't care how I do it. I'm doing it. And then I got a book deal for my own Kevin Barry book. So mine came out at the same time as my the other co-author.
I know what you mean.
I was involved with the other book as well for a number of years, but I took the majority of my material back because we just couldn't agree. He's more academic, so we couldn't agree on how to work it. And so I spent all that lockdown writing that book of Kevin Barry as it is now. And I also got commissioned then at the end of the lockdown, sort of towards June, to write the story of the musical What About Us, which isn't kind of very active at the moment, but it might rekindle. But that was a really interesting project involving Israel, Palestine, Northern Ireland, and writing the story for that. So that was cool, meeting all these musicians and stuff. Yeah, it was good.
And you mentioned your work, that play you mentioned to me in text that you co-wrote it for a musical.
Yeah, that musical. Yeah, well, I wrote that. The musical is one thing.
Is that different to what you were just talking about there? Sorry.
Yeah, well, I wrote a screenplay about Kevin Barry and his sister Kitby, and that's something that me and my friend Lisa will be trying to get out there. But what I just mentioned is the musical What About Us. That's on my website as well. It's just a tab that says musicals, and then you can go scroll down. There's a whole story of how it all came about and the basic story of the musical. It's not happening at the moment. It was kind of, lockdown was advantageous because we just did everything on Zoom. We were talking to Israel or Spain or whatever every single day. And there was a lot of creativity. A lot of Israeli musicians put forward a lot of really cool music. There was a little bit of Palestinian stuff. It was politically extremely difficult for them to get involved properly. And then you have your Irish musicians as well who were involved. So yeah, it was a exciting project, but it's a tough one to get out there because it's a difficult story. Israel Palestine.
Yeah. Well, yeah, it's a different. Probably the subject matter is probably interesting. It's probably just trying to get back in for stuff like that is not easy.
Yeah.
But you sound like a person that needs to spread your wings outside of Ireland fairly regularly. So in terms of not being able to go anywhere for 2 years, was that hard on you?
It was really hard. I mean, as I said, we'd booked Japan. That was all cancelled. Okay, fair enough. But if I hadn't done that, I would have if I hadn't stayed in Ireland, I wouldn't have gotten my own Kevin Barry book out. So it was actually a blessing. But I usually go to India every year in January to Goa or somewhere just to get away from here. But that hasn't happened since 2019 or 2019. Yeah, I've been very, very lucky though. I think what I started to appreciate was how much traveling I'd done. And then we were having all these question marks over, Jesus, can we even travel if we don't go by the book here? My God, what are we going to do? And it's still like a little bit worrying. I don't want to go on about it, but you know what I'm talking about. So, passports and, what is going to happen down the line. Just have to envision that it will all be fine. I don't know what else to do. I'm so sick of writing letters to MEPs, to, TDs. I'm just so sick of writing letters to them. I spent a lot of time last year writing letters.
Did you get involved in that kind of stuff a lot, or was it?
Yeah, I did. Yeah, and I got involved in INFTO, and I'm very involved with, the Irish Nurses for Transparency organisation. That's been fascinating, and I've had like such brave people going against the grain. Wow, I have huge admiration for Paddy Hennessy, Mark Nolan, who founded it. Many amazing nurses who are so brave to have stood up for themselves. And I felt quite kind of out of place because, like, what am I doing here? But I just felt compelled because I felt it was a very real thing that was happening on the ground, and it still is happening. So that was a huge thing for me to get involved with that from last year. And then I did write a lot of letters, and I did a lot of that kind of campaigning. I'm not a great person for going to protest, but I did go to some. But it got me.
Were you ever asked to speak at any of them?
Oh no, never asked. Except thanks to you, I got to do something at the Saoirse Arts Festival.
Is that a new experience for you, doing something like that? Can't be, surely.
What festivals? I've done festivals. Well, writing stuff. Yeah, but not.
No, but I mean, given a presentation for an hour,
Oh no! I've done loads of that, but I'm not. You said, was I asked to speak at any protests? No, because I wouldn't be involved at that level. Do you know what I mean? I wouldn't be one of those key people. Like, I just, from the sides and just writing letters. And I set up a group in Cuckoo, where I live. Very admiring actually of Thomas Sheridan, and he said that we need to set up our micro groups and our tribes in different areas, and we need to have our triple spiral, and we need to stick together. And I did it. I think I did it after he was sort of talking about that, but it had already been percolating in my mind, and that's been brilliant.
Was it difficult? I suppose there's an element of. I suppose my question would be to someone like you that is a published author, is probably known in certain circles, certain, official circles. Were you nervous about supporting stuff like that, or talking about it, or are you still?
I'm still, yes, still get a bit nervous. I mean, I've, rubbed a lot of people up the wrong way who I know,
Have you?
Well, yeah, because I can be quite vocal. I don't really want to hold back, because you do have this feeling, would you ever just see, just look at the CSO statistics, just look at what's going on. What's the big deal? There's people who just don't want to know. And I can't hold back when I actually feel confident about that fact that I actually have a factor of statistics. I'm so delighted with myself. I talked to the hairdresser a while ago, and I think she just wants me to shut up. I really do. And I said, did you not hear about the convoy in Canada? Did you not know about that? No. She said, how's your new house? I said, oh yeah. Okay. Back to the very mundane. She didn't want to
know. No, and that's the thing. That's I kind of figured that out after January, maybe in January.
Interestingly, like I made a comment on Mary Lou MacDonald's post about Kevin Barry last year on the anniversary, and I said, I don't know who you think you are talking about Kevin Barry in light of what's happening in this country and what your party's doing. I was really quite vocal about it, and I got about 300 likes. And your man Scannell, or whatever his name is, from gript.ie, he said, hey, that's really interesting. And he knew that I was grandniece Kevin Barry, so he said, can I do a little interview with you and get it out there? And like loads of my cousins are just like, what is she doing? How does she know Kevin Barry
No,
would
but
have been turning in his grave?
and did you do the interview?
Did you?
Oh, good on you, good on you.
Well, it was a written interview, and then I, tweeted it out.
Yeah.
But you're not one person who's in the family, the extended family of Kevin Barry, was interested in the slightest in what I had to say.
Yeah. That's across the board, across industries.
Yeah,
Across
it's a really
everything.
weird one, isn't it? Because you just don't know. It's the most unexpected people can be sort of thinking in the way that we're thinking, and then, but the majority don't.
No, yeah, I don't even bother. Like, I just toddle off and do my own thing now, rather than even. It doesn't even upset me because, to be honest, I think it's people of a certain age, anyone over 60 is like, I look at my own, let's say my mother or my father. They rely on Galway Bay FM, local radio, RT News, and that's their information source. They have two sources of information. So you're never going to hear, and the local newspaper, was the Tuam Herald. So that's their three sources of information. And they might buy a Sunday newspaper once in a while. But them three, you will never hear a vaccine story in any of those three, a vaccine injury story in any of those three sources of information. You'll never hear X, Y, or Z. So I'm not surprised when that's like, if that's all I knew, I'd be the exact same. That if I trusted those three sources that much. So I give a lot of what I really love is when I meet somebody that's 70 and they're wide awake. And I just love how they're going about finding stuff, because I won't say a lot, but I get a good few emails from people that would be on my Substack, and I'm always fascinated where they come to me and they say, "I found this. Did you know this?" And you find out maybe that they're one or two of them are in their 70s, and I'm just like, yes, because to break out of your thinking at that age is no small. It's probably tougher. But I was just interested to know, because I think one of the problems is that a lot of people have a bit of status in society, and it's harder for them to kind of talk, because whether their job or their status relies on it. So like when someone like you, that you'd be known, it has to be a bit frightening. Like that, it must have been little bit frightening anyway.
Yeah, well, I don't think I'm that well known, but I feel, I have to be careful, and I find it very hard to hold back on something like Twitter and just go, I have to retweet what Dr. Waters said because I so admire him. Or I have to retweet what my own doctor, Dr. Billy Ralph, said. You know what I mean? Or Dr. Malone. I'm so admiring of their courage. Especially those people who were on the front line, who really, really stood up and said, no, this isn't right. And there needs to be, an understanding that there have been cures for COVID all along, such as ivermectin, hydroxychloroquine, never mind vitamin D and C and blah, blah, blah. Medical negligence. What's happening? Are you moving house?
Sorry, there's just people going in and out here. So no, that's interesting. That's interesting to just get your perspective on that. I suppose we're nearly an hour and a half going there. I just want to do a recap on your course, The Hero's Journey, again. And do just basically, if you give us out all your social media and your contact details for this.
So the Hero's Journey starts next week, April 7th, and that's from 10 to 12 on Thursday mornings for 8 weeks. And you can do it by Zoom. You can listen to Zoom recordings afterwards as well. You'll get an email of prompts and material in between. That'll be run from the Bray Greystones area if you want to physically attend, which there's still some spaces to do so. So that's that. I just finished a heroine's journey on Zoom, and Zoom does work well, I have to say, for the kind of stuff I'm doing. So if you want to contact me, you need to go onto the website www.SiofraO'Donovan.com. It's kind of straightforward, easy to find, and there's a contact form on there, and then I'll just get an email into my inbox, and that's the best way.
How often do you run these courses?
Well, I used to run them a lot more, Jerry. Before the lockdowns, I was really busy with them. I was like working in the prisons. I was working everywhere. I was like really busy. I'd finish one course, and then maybe we would even run concurrently a hero's journey and a heroine's journey. I also have a course called Pencraft that I haven't even mentioned, but that's about the craft of writing. I'll be just running stuff all the time, be working every day. I also work for Sunbeam House. I work with intellectually challenged people. I still do that. But I used to be a lot more busy. It's like I'm just, it's hard to shift back into that because a lot, the prison work. I'm going to be doing, the prisons are going to be broadcasting an interview I did with one of the people in Portlaoise, like a teacher. She interviewed me about the book, and so that once the paperback's out, that's going to be released to all the prisons. So that's going to be a thing. But like, I'd rather physically go there, but I don't know if that's going to happen.
Okay.
I'm down to go into Mountjoy, like.
Oh, yeah. Jesus Christ! It'd be very interesting if you do get back into that. Let me know, because I'd be very interested to chat to you just specifically about the prison work, because that sounds like it could be. It's hugely interesting. Probably a great source of material for a book as well, because
well, you got to be really careful, because you're not supposed to mention anybody's name, and they don't tell you their story, so you don't know. You're going in there. I worked a lot with the political prisoners in Portlaoise, and that was the most interesting, because they're super motivated, super engaged, super writers. Arbor Hill actually has very good writing group in there, but I wouldn't be too mad on going back into Arbor Hill, because the nature of those offences. Anyway, all very middle class and everything, but and then Mountjoy, I have never actually taught in there, but I'd absolutely love to, because of the Kevin Barry connection. And I think they would like me to, so I kind of need to push that forward a bit as well.
Yeah, it'd be nearly a documentary, that. So I suppose we can wrap it up. I just want to take the opportunity to thank you for giving me an hour and a half of your time this evening, to go through your life, your work, and your courses and your creative writing stuff. It's been fascinating to listen to it. Again, is there anything else we've forgotten, or is there anything else you wanted to say?
No, just no, not really. Just the Kevin Barry book, the paperback will be out in September. It's called Yours Till Hell Freezes, published by Curragh Books. Be a few book launches, we do a few live things and videos and things as well. And the Dark Forest book is the next one I want to get out, which is historical fantasy fiction, which is like, that's where I want to go.
When that comes out, let me know, so we'll see if, I'm sure, but I think that sounds like a very interesting read. So
well, you're kind of into historical stuff, so I forgot. You did your MA in creative writing in Galway, didn't you?
No, I didn't do any MA.
Did you not?
No, I didn't. I did an arts degree, and then I went into I did a diploma in software design and development. Went completely off track.
Oh, okay. I thought that you had done an MA in creative writing somewhere.
No. Unfortunately, no. Sorry.
I don't think it's necessary at all to do those MAs. Like I wouldn't.
I wouldn't
mind teaching on one now.
I nearly did an MPhil, but it was like a philosophy, history, whatever it was in it, but I didn't.
Oh, cool. Yeah.
But no, I was glad.
But you're incredibly active in what you do. Like, you're out there all the time. Like, you have huge energy, and to pull what you pulled together at the Saoirse Arts Festival was, whoa! Like, I don't know. I wouldn't go for that.
I don't know if I was able for that.
Well, you did it. You did it, and you benefited so many people. So yeah.
Yeah, well, hopefully they get something going. They got something out of it anyway. So So
definitely. So thanks.
We'll leave it there. Not at all. Thanks yourself. I'm just going to end the broadcast, and you can stay on there if you want for just a minute.
Okay, grand.